Emma Carter hurried through the bustling streets of Manhattan, her heels clicking against the pavement as she weaved through the morning crowd. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of freshly brewed coffee from nearby cafes, mixing with the distant honking of impatient taxi drivers. Today was the day, her big interview at Titan Corp, one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the country. Landing the senior management consultant position could change her life. She had spent 6 months preparing for this opportunity, studying the company's financials, understanding their corporate culture, and even rehearsing answers to potential interview questions in front of her bathroom mirror. At 32 years old, Emma had worked tirelessly to build her career, climbing her way up from entry-level roles with sheer determination. This interview was her shot at finally stepping into a position that aligned with both her ambition and values. Her phone buzzed in her handbag. Glancing down, she saw a text from her best friend, Maggie. "You got this, Em. Call me after and tell me how it went. Knock him dead." Emma smiled, tucking a loose strand of chestnut brown hair behind her ear. She checked her reflection in the window of a high-end clothing store. Her navy blazer was crisp, her hair styled to perfection, and her makeup just right. She had dressed the part of a polished professional, ready to impress. Just 3 more blocks to go. As she picked up her pace, something ahead made her pause. A man in his mid to late 40s was kneeling on the sidewalk, frantically gathering a mess of scattered papers, a damaged laptop, and what looked like the contents of a broken leather satchel. The bag strap had completely torn, leaving his belongings strewn across the pavement. People walked past without stopping, some barely glancing his way, others stepping around him with mild annoyance. A businessman in a tailored suit muttered, "Unbelievable," as he sidestepped the scene, adjusting the AirPods in his ears. Emma hesitated. She had exactly 18 minutes left before her interview. She could keep walking. If she hurried, she would arrive with a few minutes to spare, just enough time to compose herself before meeting the hiring panel. The man wouldn't even notice if she passed him by. But then she saw his hands shake as he fumbled to collect his documents. His frustration was evident, his breathing quick and shallow. Emma sighed. Before she could second-guess herself, she crouched down beside him. "Here, let me help," she said, reaching for the papers closest to her. The man looked up, startled. His dark eyes, sharp and intelligent, met hers with a mix of gratitude and surprise. He had an air of someone accustomed to confidence, but right now, he seemed uncharacteristically flustered. "You don't have to," he said, but she was already gathering the papers. "It's fine. We'll be faster together," Emma replied. "I'm Jake, by the way," he said, stuffing some documents into his bag, now rendered useless. "Emma," she said, handing him a stack of papers. "What happened?" Jake let out a breath, shaking his head. "My bag finally gave out on me. Probably karma for buying the cheapest one I could find." Despite her growing anxiety about the time, Emma found herself smiling at his dry humor. They worked quickly, but each second felt like it was slipping through her fingers. 15 minutes left. Then 12. Then 10. When they finally stood, Jake clutched his damaged bag awkwardly. "I made you late for something, didn't I?" he asked, noticing the way she checked her watch. Emma forced a small smile. "Nothing that can't be rescheduled." She knew she was lying. Titan Corp wasn't the kind of company that just handed out second chances. But the idea of leaving someone stranded when she could help didn't sit right with her. Jake ran a hand through his slightly disheveled dark hair. "At least let me buy you a coffee to say thanks. I know a great little spot around the corner." Emma hesitated. She should say no. She should call Titan Corp and beg for a later slot. but something about this moment felt important. For reasons she couldn't quite explain, she found herself nodding. "Sure," she said. "Coffee sounds good." As they walked, her phone buzzed one final time. The towering glass skyscraper of Titan Corp loomed in the distance, but Emma didn't look back. She didn't know it yet, but this split-second decision to help a stranger was about to change everything. The coffee shop Jake had chosen wasn't one of the sleek, modern cafes that Emma usually frequented. Instead, it was a small, tucked-away place nestled between a used bookstore and a vintage clothing shop. The scent of roasted coffee beans filled the air as they stepped inside, a sharp contrast to the corporate atmosphere she had imagined spending her morning in. Emma wrapped her hands around a steaming cup of Americano, feeling its warmth seep through her fingers. Across from her, Jake inspected his battered laptop, turning it over carefully. "I think this is salvageable," he said, tapping on the case. Emma raised an eyebrow. That was quite a fall. "Are you sure?" He flashed a quick smile, a mix of amusement and determination. "I've survived worse. Besides, I had a guardian angel in a business suit come to my rescue." Emma laughed softly. She should be panicking, calling Titan Corp, scrambling to fix what she had lost this morning. But, strangely, she didn't feel regret. She excused herself and stepped outside to make the dreaded phone call. To her surprise, the HR coordinator was understanding. "These things happen, Miss Carter. Would next Thursday work for you?" Emma nearly sighed in relief. "Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much." When she returned, Jake had tucked away his laptop and was watching her curiously. "Good news?" he asked. They rescheduled for next week. She settled back into her chair. "I should be furious with myself, but somehow I'm not." Jake stirred his coffee. "Because you're a good person who helped someone in need? Or because you're terrible at prioritizing your career?" Emma laughed. "Maybe both." The conversation between them flowed effortlessly. Jake asked about her consulting work, showing genuine interest in her perspective on corporate culture. She found herself opening up more than she expected about her dreams, her late father's influence, and how she wanted to change the way companies treated their employees. "Most consultants I've met just want to maximize profits," Jake observed, tilting his head slightly. "You're different." Emma shrugged. "Maybe that's why I'm still interviewing instead of running my own firm." Jake leaned forward. "What if companies don't want to change? What if the profit motive always wins?" Emma met his gaze, unwavering. "Then I keep pushing until something gives." Jake was quiet for a moment, studying her. Then, finally, he spoke. "I like that answer." They stayed longer than expected, talking about everything from corporate ethics to New York's best pizza places. Emma realized she hadn't had a conversation this engaging in years. It wasn't just the words, it was the way Jake listened, as if he genuinely cared. She checked her watch and sighed. "I should go. I have client calls this afternoon." Jake hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a slightly bent business card. "In case you want to continue this conversation sometime," he said, sliding it across the table. Emma took it, running her thumb over the simple black and white text. There was no company name, no title, just Jake Walker and a phone number. "I'd like that," she admitted, slipping the card into her wallet. Outside, the city had fully woken up, its energy buzzing through the streets. Emma's phone buzzed with 3 messages from Maggie, no doubt demanding updates about the interview. She'd have to explain everything later, Her friend would either think she was insane or brilliant for skipping her interview to have coffee with a mystery man. As she walked toward the subway, she realized something strange. She felt lighter than she had in months. Sometimes, the best moments came from broken plans. What Emma didn't see was Jake watching her leave from the cafe window, his expression troubled. He pulled out his wallet and thumbed through its contents until he reached a sleek business card, one embossed in silver with the name Ethan Reynolds, CEO, Titan Corp. He hadn't meant to lie. But now, it was too late. The sleek glass and steel lobby of Titan Corp was exactly what Emma had envisioned: modern, pristine, and intimidating. The air smelled faintly of fresh espresso and polished marble, and the large digital display behind the reception desk flashed Titan Corp's latest innovations. She checked her watch, 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes early. Emma Carter for the 9 a.m. interview, she said to the receptionist, keeping her voice steady. The young woman behind the desk smiled. "Welcome, Miss Carter. HR will be down to escort you shortly. Please have a seat." Emma sat in the waiting area, smoothing the fabric of her navy blazer. She had spent the last week preparing, rehearsing answers, reviewing financial reports, and studying Titan Corp's leadership philosophy. Today, she was ready. But there was something else, too, an underlying restlessness that had nothing to do with the interview. It was Jake. She hadn't seen him since their last coffee, but they had texted, a few casual exchanges, a lingering familiarity. There was something about him that still felt unresolved. The soft chime of the elevator doors opening pulled her back to the moment. Two men walked out, deep in conversation. They were dressed in impeccable suits, their voices low and serious as they discussed quarterly projections. Emma wasn't paying attention at first, until she recognized one of the voices. Her breath caught in her throat. The man leading the conversation, the one speaking with quiet authority, wasn't just another executive. It was Jake. Except it wasn't. It was Ethan Reynolds, CEO of Titan Corp. Her Jake, the man she had shared coffee with, the one who had debated corporate ethics and laughed at her terrible jokes, wasn't a freelance writer at all. He was the very person she had been researching for months, preparing to impress, hoping to work for. Their eyes met. For the briefest second, something flickered across his face, guilt, hesitation, something unspoken. Then, just as quickly, his expression turned unreadable. "Miss Carter," he said evenly, his voice now controlled and professional. Emma felt like the ground had shifted beneath her. What was she supposed to say? But her body reacted on autopilot. She stood, extended a hand. Firm grip. Steady voice. "Don't let them see you falter." "Mr. Reynolds," she replied, matching his tone. The other executives nodded politely and continued down the hall. But Ethan, Jake, whoever he was, lingered for a brief moment. "My office," he said quietly. 5 minutes. Emma watched him walk away, her mind racing. This wasn't just a surprise. This was a betrayal. A lie. The receptionist returned, holding a bottle of water. "Mr. Reynolds would like to conduct the initial interview personally," she said with a warm smile. "Follow me, please." Emma swallowed hard, squared her shoulders, and nodded. This was either going to be the best or worst interview of her life. And she had no idea which. Emma sat stiffly in the high-backed leather chair opposite Ethan Reynolds, the man she had once known as Jake Walker. The view from his 42nd floor office was breathtaking. New York City stretched out in all directions, bathed in the golden morning light. But Emma barely noticed. She could still feel the ghost of their conversations over coffee, hear his laughter as they debated corporate ethics, see the way he listened, really listened, as if her ideas mattered. And yet, none of it was real. She gripped her portfolio tightly, more for stability than anything else. "Close the door," Ethan said quietly. Emma hesitated, then did as he asked. She turned back to face him, arms crossed, pulse hammering. "Were you ever going to tell me?" she demanded, her voice sharper than she intended. Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his neatly styled hair, the same gesture she had seen 100 times before, except now, it felt like a lie too. "I was going to tell you today," he said finally. "After the interview." Emma let out a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, right. That would have been a lovely surprise, wouldn't it? Sit through an interview I spent months preparing for, only to find out that the guy I've been having coffee with was the CEO all along?" Ethan leaned forward, resting his forearms on the desk. "Emma, I never planned for this to happen." "Plan for what, exactly? To deceive me? To test me?" Her voice wavered between anger and something dangerously close to hurt. "No." His response was immediate, sincere. "The first day, the bag, the broken laptop, that was real. But when you stopped to help me, something changed. I realized that for once, I could have a conversation without someone seeing me as the CEO first. Without an agenda. So he hesitated, I let it happen." Emma shook her head, looking away. Every moment replayed in her mind, the way he had listened to her talk about her dreams, the way he had challenged her thoughts on corporate culture, the way he had acted like just another guy figuring life out. It had all been a carefully guarded half-truth. "So what was I to you?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "An experiment? A social study on how people interact with you when they don't know who you really are?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "You were never an experiment." Emma scoffed. "Really? Because I feel like a fool sitting here, realizing that every single morning over coffee, I was talking about impressing Titan Corp's leadership team while you," she motioned toward him, "were sitting there, knowing exactly who I was and never saying a word." "I wanted to tell you," he admitted. "But every time I tried, I stopped. Because I was selfish." Emma swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Selfish how?" "Because I liked being Jake with you." His voice was softer now, tinged with something close to regret. "Because for the first time in years, I had a conversation with someone who didn't see my title first. Who challenged me. Who," he hesitated, then finished, "who I looked forward to seeing every day." Emma clenched her jaw, forcing back emotions she didn't want to feel. "You should have told me." Ethan nodded. "I know." Silence hung between them, heavy and unresolved. Finally, Emma took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. "You know what? It doesn't matter anymore," she said, standing. "We still have an interview to finish." Ethan straightened. "You still want to go through with it?" "I spent 6 months preparing for this meeting," she said, gripping her portfolio. "I'm not about to let a personal betrayal ruin a professional opportunity." For a moment, Ethan just looked at her. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Then let's begin." And just like that, the conversation shifted. The room was no longer filled with the weight of deception and personal betrayal. It was now an interview, a professional exchange between a CEO and a candidate. But Emma knew the truth, something between them had irrevocably changed. Emma sat in her apartment, staring at the official job offer from Titan Corp glowing on her laptop screen. The numbers were better than she had hoped, a generous salary, excellent benefits, and the exact role she had been working toward for years. But instead of excitement, All she felt was conflicted. It had been 3 days since her interview with Ethan. 3 days since she discovered the truth. Her phone buzzed beside her. She didn't have to look, she already knew who it was. Ethan. She had ignored his texts all weekend. Not out of spite, but because she needed time. Time to process. Time to figure out how she could take this job and still protect herself from further disappointment. A sharp knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find Maggie, holding a bottle of wine in one hand and a bag of takeout in the other. "Okay, spill," Maggie said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Emma sighed, shutting the door. "There's nothing to spill. They offered me the job. It's a great opportunity." Maggie plopped onto the couch, setting the takeout on the coffee table. "And yet, you look like someone just told you your dog ran away." Emma hesitated, then sat down across from her. "I don't know how to work there, knowing what I know now." Maggie gave her a pointed look. "You mean knowing that the CEO, who you had coffee with for weeks, was lying to you the whole time?" Emma winced. Maggie sighed, opening the wine and pouring them each a glass. "Look, I get it. What he did was messed up. But the job is the job, right? If it's what you want, then take it. Just make some rules." Emma took a slow sip of wine, considering. "Rules?" Maggie nodded. Asterisk boundaries. Clear, professional boundaries. If you take the job, then for the first month, it's strictly work. No coffee meetups. No long conversations in his office. No getting sucked back into whatever that was. Emma let the idea settle. It made sense. If she was going to work at Titan Corp, she needed to establish control from day one. 1 month, she murmured. Maggie raised an eyebrow. "What?" Emma sat up straighter, setting her glass down. "If I take this job, then for 1 month, we are strictly CEO and employee. No personal conversations. No meetings outside of work unless they're professional. If after a month, I still feel like I can trust him, then maybe we revisit this." Maggie considered for a moment, then nodded. "Sounds like a solid plan. But are you sure you can stick to it?" Emma exhaled. "I have to." She reached for her laptop, staring at the contract waiting for her signature. Then, with a steady hand, she signed it. Across town, Ethan sat in his penthouse office, staring at his phone. A new message popped up. "Emma, I've signed the contract. 1 month. Strictly professional." He exhaled, a mix of relief and apprehension settling over him. 1 month. He just hoped he could keep his promise. The first month at Titan Corp passed in a blur of meetings, reports, and long hours. Emma threw herself into her work, determined to prove, to herself and to everyone else, that she had earned this job on her own merit. She kept her interactions with Ethan Reynolds strictly professional, treating him no differently than any other executive. And, to his credit, he respected her boundaries. There were no unexpected texts, no coffee invitations, no moments of lingering conversation after meetings. He kept their exchanges brief and focused, his demeanor as polished and composed as any CEO should be. And yet, she felt his presence everywhere. She saw him in meetings, his sharp mind dissecting problems with ease. She heard him in the hallways, speaking with employees about company culture and ethics, the very things they had debated over coffee. She had convinced herself that she could move on, that the version of him she had known, Jake Walker, the thoughtful, witty, coffee-drinking writer, had been nothing but an illusion. But that illusion refused to fade. It lingered in the way he sometimes hesitated before speaking, as if stopping himself from saying something more. It was there in the unread texts on her phone, the ones she had refused to delete. And, most of all, it was in the way she still thought about him, far more than she wanted to admit. On the morning of the 31st day, Emma walked into Titan Corp's lobby feeling lighter than she had in weeks. She had done what she set out to do, established herself professionally, set clear boundaries, and held firm to them. And yet, something inside her told her it was time. When she arrived at her office, her phone buzzed. A single text from Ethan. Coffee. Not as CEO and employee. Just us. Emma stared at the message for a long moment, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then, finally, she typed back. Same place as before. 8 a.m. The coffee shop was exactly the same as the first time they had met, the same worn wooden tables, the same scent of roasted espresso in the air. But everything else felt different. Ethan was already there when she arrived. He wasn't in his usual perfectly tailored suit. Instead, he had opted for something in between the CEO's crisp professionalism and Jake Walker's casual charm. A simple button-down shirt, dark jeans, and a look in his eyes that told her he had been waiting for this moment. Emma slid into the seat across from him. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi." He slid a cup of coffee toward her, just like he had on that very first morning. "Your usual." She hesitated, then picked it up, taking a slow sip. "So," she said, setting the cup down. "How's corporate culture reform going?" Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "You already know, you wrote the damn proposal." She smirked. "Just making sure you're still paying attention." For a moment, there was silence, but it wasn't tense or uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that came with familiarity, with knowing that words weren't always necessary. Finally, Ethan leaned forward. "This past month," he said carefully, "watching you work, seeing the impact you've made here, it's been," he exhaled, "harder than I expected." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Harder how?" "Harder not talking to you outside of work. Not sending you ridiculous texts about the worst corporate jargon I've heard that day. Not asking about your latest book recommendation." Emma swallowed, looking down at her coffee. "I meant what I said, Ethan. I needed this time to prove to myself that I belonged at Titan Corp because of my abilities, not because of whatever this is." "And did you?" She met his gaze. "Yes." A small, knowing smile tugged at his lips. "I never doubted you would." She let out a slow breath. "I don't know what happens next," she admitted. "Neither do I," he said, and for the first time since she had met him, he didn't look like the man who always had all the answers. And somehow, that made her feel better. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing against his. "But maybe," she said softly, "we can figure it out. Together." Ethan exhaled, flipping his hand over so that his palm met hers. "I'd like that." Outside, New York hummed with life, the city continuing as it always did. But inside the small coffee shop, something new was beginning. The sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the skyline in shades of gold and crimson. From the 42nd floor of Titan Corp, the view was nothing short of breathtaking. Emma stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of her office, watching the city come alive with the twinkle of a million lights. She had spent 6 months at Titan Corp now, 6 months of hard work, transforming corporate culture, implementing changes that mattered. Employee satisfaction was up 30%, work-life balance initiatives had been adopted, and Titan Corp was on its way to becoming a model for ethical leadership. And yet, it was the small moments that made it all worth it, the quiet victories, the employees who felt heard, the culture shift that had once seemed impossible. Her phone buzzed on her desk. A text from Ethan. "Dinner?" She smiled, typing back. "Late meeting with the Tokyo team. Rain check?" A reply came almost instantly. "Coffee tomorrow then. Usual place?" Emma smirked, shaking her head. Wouldn't miss it. Some things hadn't changed. They still met for coffee 3 mornings a week, before the city fully woke up. But at work, they maintained their boundaries, keeping their professional and personal lives separate. It had been a delicate balance, one that required patience, trust, and a mutual respect for what they were building together. Her desk phone buzzed. "Miss Carter, Mr. Reynolds asked if you could stop by his office before you leave." Emma glanced at the time. 7:12 p.m. She had planned to wrap up her emails and head home, but she sighed and grabbed her tablet. "Tell him I'll be there in 5. Ethan's office was just as she remembered it from that first day, sleek, modern, with a view that could stop anyone in their tracks. He was standing near the window when she walked in, his jacket draped over the back of his chair, sleeves rolled up, reviewing a document on his desk. "You wanted to see me?" she asked, crossing her arms. He turned, smiling slightly. "Tokyo team can wait until tomorrow," he said. Emma raised an eyebrow. "Ethan." He held up his hands in surrender. "As your CEO, I absolutely respect your dedication to global operations. But as the guy who has dinner reservations at that Italian place you mentioned last week, I think you should reconsider your schedule." Emma laughed, shaking her head. "That's cheating." "That's multitasking," he corrected, smirking. "Besides, the Tokyo team will be just as impressed by your proposals tomorrow morning." She exhaled, considering for a moment. "Fine. Give me 15 minutes to wrap up emails. I'll wait." Later, over plates of pasta and glasses of red wine, they talked, not about work, not about corporate policies, but about everything else. "Sometimes I miss Jake," Emma admitted, swirling her wine glass. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Jake Walker? The struggling writer with the broken laptop?" "Just a little," she teased. He chuckled. "He's still here. Just with better clothes and a lot more responsibility." Emma smiled, meeting his gaze. "And no more secrets." Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand. "No more secrets." Outside, New York pulsed with life, the city continuing as it always did. But for them, the world felt just a little bit quieter, simpler, more real. Tomorrow, they would return to Titan Corp, back to meetings, deadlines, and corporate decisions. But tonight, they were just Ethan and Emma. Just 2 people who had found something real in the most unexpected of places. And maybe, just maybe, that was the best ending of all. Life often unfolds in ways we don't expect. Emma's story is a testament to the power of serendipity, integrity, and personal growth. In a world that values strict planning and ambition, she reminds us that sometimes, the most meaningful moments happen when we least anticipate them. One of the most powerful lessons from her journey is that kindness can change everything. A small decision, helping a stranger on the street, set off a chain of events that altered the course of her life. It's easy to rush past people in need, too focused on our own responsibilities to pause. But as we age, we often realize that our most fulfilling moments weren't just about personal success, but about human connection and the impact we have on others. Another important takeaway is the value of integrity and setting boundaries. Emma chose to work hard to prove herself professionally, refusing to let personal emotions define her career. This reminds us that respect and trust must be earned, whether in business or personal relationships. As we navigate different stages of life, we, too, must establish healthy boundaries, whether in our careers, friendships, or family relationships, to ensure mutual respect and genuine connections. Lastly, this story highlights the idea that it's never too late for new beginnings. No matter our age or stage in life, unexpected opportunities, both professional and personal, can arise. Whether it's a career shift, a new friendship, or even love, the key is to remain open to possibilities while staying true to ourselves. In the end, life isn't just about reaching a destination, it's about the relationships we build and the lessons we learn along the way.